I'd like to welcome all of you back to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder, and we're going to be back talking about the Billy Meyer case today. It feels good to be back. It's been a while. I've had so much going on in my life outside of radio, particularly in the music world, and my day job is just absolutely so busy, so it's good to be back to talk to you about what I think is probably the most important thing you possibly could know. And, Edward Albert Meyer is truly a interesting man. He's about 81 years old. He has written over 50 books, 50 plus books, and these books include a book called the Talmud of Jmmanuel, which I'm going to talk about this evening. I actually do have a copy of that, thanks to Stephen, I guess, who is my producer and tells me I have a bit of an echo right now. I'm not sure what I can do about that. Hopefully it's not too bad. Another book Billy's written called The Psyche. Another one is The Might of Thoughts. An additional one is called The Way to Live. We also have something called The Goblet of Truth. And what I'm going to start out talking about this evening is controlling negative thoughts. How to defeat negative thoughts. So, how do we do that? Well, you have been programmed. The first 1 through 7 years of age, our subconscious is basically turned on, and we are downloading, so to speak, information. We're observing our parents, and we pick up a ton of negativity. If you look at the work of Dr. Bruce Lipton, he explains that we are programmed during our childhood with so much negativity, and this negativity continues to come out. I've heard as high as something like we have 10,000 negative thoughts per day, typically. And that's because it's part of your subconscious. It's part of your subconscious programming. And that's why so many people are on medication. That's why so many people commit suicide. That's why so many marriages break up. That's why people fail in their jobs. Many times it's because their thoughts, they cannot get control of their thoughts. Now there's this book that Billy has written that's absolutely fantastic. It's called The Might of Thoughts. In the German it's Macht der Gedanken, and page 200 to about 230, it talks about the importance of being confident and optimistic and relaxed and cheerful. So I over time, I've kind of created a little exercise for myself. First of all, you have to be very sensitive about your feelings, because the first clue you'll get is a negative feeling. And a negative feeling indicates probably that you've had a negative thought. And it may be a subconscious thought, it may be a conscious thought. And the thoughts grow out of the feelings. So if you sense a negative thought, say you're waking up first thing in the morning and you feel your feelings again, you're feeling a little bit of a sense of dread, maybe because of work or whatever, who knows. Well, you want to correct that. And sometimes in order to correct that, you just tell yourself, I'm confident, I'm optimistic, I'm relaxed, I'm cheerful, I'm enthusiastic. And just by saying those things, you'll start your neutral positive thinking on its way. And then you can continue and tell yourself, I'm the forger of my own fortune, I'm the creator of my own good luck. I do not allow my thoughts to drift. I steer my thoughts like a captain steers his ship. It is the nature of the thoughts that by their might alone, any conceivable thing can be brought into fruition. So, in the Might of Thoughts on page 200, it says, regardless of how the human being's present situation and surroundings may form and appear, they will always be in accord with your thoughts. And he or she thereby also, his or her world stands or falls precisely with his or her thoughts, his or her ruminations, his visions, his fantasies, his ideas, his imaginations, and his wishes. So the Maya information doesn't really leave any room for the victim mentality that is prevalent today. You know, people say they're a victim of racism, or they're a victim of sexism, or they're a victim of their genetics. No, really, everything in your situation is generally attributable to your own thoughts. Now, what is a rumination? A rumination is a deep or considered thought about something. And there's extensive research on the effects of rumination. In other words, the tendency to reflect shows that a negative form of rumination, which is sometimes associated with dysphoria, interferes with people's ability to focus on problem solving and results in dwelling on negative thoughts. So if you ruminate, means if you have a negative rumination, you will continue to churn over emotional upsets. So let me read on page 202 of my thoughts here. It says, in fact, all these confused, incapable, and unknowledgeable, as well as resentful and erring human beings, do not see the fact that all these human beings who they envy and insult have voluntarily taken upon themselves failures, errors, and battles, as well as efforts and hardships, in order to give their lives a zeal and to work themselves up high. So what we're trying to do here is take control of our thoughts, because it is the nature of the thoughts that by their might alone, every conceivable thing can be brought to fruition. So tell yourself, I'm confident, I'm optimistic, I am cheerful, I am relaxed, I am enthusiastic, I am thankful, I am in harmony, I persist, I persevere, I endure, I am calm, and I am satisfied. So if you can keep these things in your mind, you will stop the trend of negative thinking. And that's what we're trying to do here. So if you have negative thoughts, you bring in a positive inclusion into that negative thought, and that makes it neutral positive. And that's what we're shooting for. Where does neutral positive thinking ultimately result? And is identified in Contact Report 10. A human full of creative spiritual wisdom, full of knowledge, truth, love, and cognition, knows that from the truth everything originates and will originate for all eternity. Therefore, he identifies himself with each and everything. In his spiritual consciousness, he will always be in his innermost part, one with each and everything. In his interior, in his spiritual consciousness, he will identify himself with everything in the universe in the same manner that the other one, who thinks materialistically, identifies himself with his body, with his money, with his possessions, with his confused speaking and teaching, and with the sound of his own voice. So if you're a materialistic intellectual thinker, you won't be able to identify yourself with creation. with everything. You will be looking at the details of life, your money, your body, your possessions. So we have to have two completely different kinds of thoughts here. And I am going to bring on a guest today, hopefully. Maybe two. Really, I don't know. I'll have to see here if they're ready to roll yet. Anyway, that was just the beginning of learning how to control your thoughts. Another important thing to do in terms of your thoughts is to clarify your thoughts, to strengthen your thoughts. And if you clarify and strengthen your thoughts, they will become more valuable and purposeful for you. And this is one of the most important things. And, Billy's first extraterrestrial mentor, a man named Swath, used to meet with Billy back in right around 1945. He would land his silvery pear-shaped craft in Bulak, Switzerland, and it said he would lift up Billy as if he was being lifted up by ghostly hands. Some kind of technology would bring Billy into the ship. And one of the things that Swath taught Billy was the importance of confidence. And he said it this way, let me read it here. He says, "To that end, his entire work and all action also contribute, as also do manner and responsibility, how he confronts his obligations and the fulfillment of obligations and how he lives." And this is what Swath says: you must build up great confidence for all your future and for all the success of your works, your tasks, your job and mission, and always know that you will accomplish everything and never fail. And only if you maintain the correctness of your thoughts and feelings, as well as your work and your actions, in every respect, and also use your great powers of consciousness in this form, you will be able to have true confidence in yourself and not allow this to be shaken by anything. Therefore, acquire confidence and certainty that you will always maintain control, whereby you shall not, however, behave in a way which does not correspond to your nature, because the human being shall see and recognize that you are a human being as they are themselves. So what is confidence? Well, confidence is a feeling of self-assurance arising from your own abilities and your own qualities. And one of the things that Swath told Billy is that he must build up a great confidence in his future works. Very interesting. Swath was an extraterrestrial human. He was about 900 years old. He would land his silvery pear-shaped craft in northern Switzerland near the Eichen-Moser and Bruder Mountains in the canton of Zurich, and he would take young Edward Albert Meyer up into his craft. Now, the interesting thing was that Swath was related to Billy's predecessor personalities, one of which was what's called the universal prophet, which it was a Nocodamian. And Nocodamian was one of the teachers of these extraterrestrials. And one of the predecessor personalities of Edward Albert Meyer. And we're going to talk a little bit about reincarnation today. I think the way the show's kind of flowing, so that'll make it more interesting. But Swath was here on the earth for the first 11 years of Billy's life, from about 1943 to about 1954, something like that. And he was Billy's mentor. He had known, evidently, Nocodamian, and was related to Billy through these predecessor personalities. So one of the previous personalities of Svath had worked with one of the previous personalities of Billy, which is extremely interesting. You see, we all have what's called a spiritual consciousness, which lives many, many lives. One of the other lives of the spiritual consciousness of Edward Albert Meyer was a guy named Emmanuel. Emmanuel is erroneously called Jesus today, which is very interesting. I've told this story many, many times, and I'll tell it probably many more times. I would always avoid this part of the Meyer case because of my Christian background, and I actually thought it was probably very incorrect. But as I looked into it, I was astonished to learn that there was no letter J in the ancient world. So the person that we call Jesus today started to become being called Jesus right around the 1500s. There was a guy named Gian Giorgio Torrisano, an Italian scholar and playwright, which invented the letter J. And before that, there was no letter J in the Hebrew or in the Greek or the New Testament or the Hebrew and the Aramaic of the Old Testament. So the people that we call Jeremiah or Joseph or John or Jesus or Job, they had different names in the ancient world. Most of those names began with an I or a Y sound. Now, the Meyer people say that the name Emmanuel was the real name of the person that we call Jesus Christ today. And I'm convinced, absolutely, unless someone can show me a very good reason, there's absolutely no way his name could have been Jesus Christ. Now, think about the implications of that in terms of our world today. The central figure of Western society, they renamed him for whatever reason, which is extremely bizarre if you think about it. I'm going to go back in this book, this very, very huge book. It's called the Talmud of Jmmanuel. According to this book, according to Meyer information, the person that we call Jesus Christ was really called Emmanuel. Was one of the predecessor personalities of the spiritual consciousness of Edward Albert Meyer. He had two disciples named Judas. One, which wrote this thing called the Talmud of Jmmanuel, and that was Judas, Ischkerioth, Ishkeroth, and there is a Judas who was the traitor, who spells his name differently, and I'll get into this. I think I'll have time to get into this today. It's an important thing to remember. So there are two Judases according to the Talmud of Jmmanuel. One was a very loyal disciple of Emmanuel who wrote this script, this scroll, which was discovered by a guy named Issa Rashid and it's discovered by Billy Meyer. It was translated by Issa Rashid from the Aramaic to German. Now, Issa Rashid's name was actually Marcus Issa Rashid. And Billy and Issa discovered this scroll in Jerusalem in an old tomb, and it tells this story. And it's very, very interesting. Billy has gone in and corrected the translation, and he's written hundreds of pages to explain things and set the stage in very, very various ways. And one thing that he talks about is a history of the Jews. And Billy calls these the God believers. Now, most of the world today, most of the religions today, whether it's Christianity, whether it's Islam or Judaism believes in a God. Now, the Meyer information says there's not really a personified being like a Heavenly Father or a Mother Nature that judges people and sends some people to hell or heaven and based on anything like that. But there is a universal consciousness, and it's a very unusual kind of being, and it's described in the Meyer information as a Wesenheiten. A Wesenheiten has more in common with gas or rocks or the ocean or a tree than it does a human being. The universal consciousness has no personality. Now, this is a hard thing for us to understand. It takes quite some time to start to wrap your mind around this. But the Jews had already gone down the wrong path. They had misunderstood the teaching of Emmanuel and their prophets. They had misunderstood the teaching of the prophets. So, the designation of Jew in the Hebrew is Yehudi, is in relation to the belief of this people fundamentally incorrect, because a human being who is a Jew is, since time immemorial, a member of the tribe and the inhabitants of the southern kingdom. So the Jews were believers in Yahweh. And Yahweh is sometimes the name that is chosen, that they chose for God. So, and ethnically, the Jews understand themselves as descendants of Abraham. Now, Emmanuel, when he was on the earth, called the Jews in many ways the God believers. And they had misunderstood the teaching of the prophets, which taught about creation, which taught about the immortality of the spiritual consciousness of the spirit form, and they had personified the universal consciousness. Now, what had actually happened, if you talk about the Meyer material and read the Meyer material, then you will see that there was a group of extraterrestrials on the earth in the ancient past. They were called the Giza intelligences. And one of these Giza intelligences passed himself off as the creator of everything, or God, so to speak. Now, if you look at Jewish monotheism, it's founded on Yahweh, who is regarded as God, from the God belief. And if you go to Exodus 3:14, it says, the self-revelation of the name God, which is translated, now get this, I will be whom I will be. Now this is what Billy describes as somewhat idiotic for a supposedly rational God, who was originally called Yahweh or Yahweh, and it was incorrectly read as Jehovah or Jehovah. Jehovah with a Y most likely. Now can you imagine for example, the Jehovah's Witnesses now, who occasionally come to my house here. Now they don't understand that the name Jehovah was actually a mispronunciation of Yahweh or Yahweh. So this is just very, very interesting, I think. And the fact that there was a real man on the earth named Yahweh or he was a human being and part of this group called the Giza Intelligences, which, the Great Pyramid is 73,000 years old according to Maya material. And there were these old cubical constructions far below the Great Pyramid. And a group of people that were related to these Pleiaren that Billy meets with. They were a splinter group. They were a group that weren't following what's called the creational natural laws. And they resided in these cubical constructions far below the Great Pyramid. And they used religion for many, many years to try to gain control of the people of the earth. Now, this happened during the time of Atlantis. It happened, I should say, after the time of Atlantis, kind of after the fall of Atlantis to about 6,000, or for about 6 or 7,000 years, just before these Giza intelligences were here until about the 1970s. They had actually contacted Hitler. They had contacted the Thule Society. And there was a fellow named Erich Steinschneider who was their liaison with Hitler. And Erich Steinschneider, who went by another name as well, Hermann Steinschneider, and Eric, he was also called Eric Jameson, I believe. He worked with Hitler. He kind of pulled Hitler down the wrong path. Hitler was actually, according to the Maya teachings, was actually going to be a very beneficial ruler to the people of the earth. But that didn't work out so well because of these Giza intelligences. I know there's a lot of information here to pull together. I wanted to talk a little bit. We have various religions on the earth. We have Judaism today. We have Christianity. And there are 5 major religions: Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, and Hinduism. So, for example, Christos, which means the anointed, is related to Christianity now. Now we call the individual Jesus of Nazareth. He was truthfully named Emmanuel. So we have Christianity. Now we have this information that says Emmanuel is the Son of God. That's what we have today. Which, of course, is a false teaching. And I am going to have to, let me double check and see if my guest is ready. I don't know. Let me see if I can bring my producer on. I'm to, oops. Stephen, are you there?
Hello?
Stephen.
Yes.
I'm going to have to let you take over again, man. I hate to do this to you. Again.
Not. Yeah, not a problem.
If you can read or something, I have to take this dog out. I'm sorry. Here we go.
Sure. Yep, not a problem. Hello, everybody. Just thought I picked up the copy of the Decalogue and Dodecalogue yesterday and going through that. It's been very interesting. I don't know if anybody has read that yet, but I haven't had a time to study it, but just about halfway through it. And wonderful book. It clarifies some things that are sometimes harder to read in the Goblet of Truth, I would say. I mean, that's a great book as well, but very long, and this one's more concise and gets to the point pretty good on a lot of things. So far, it's been very interesting. Trying to think of the main thing that struck me as far as reading it so far. So I think the first thing would be like the love of creation and how that is the basis for everything. Trying to extrapolate this into a way here off the cuff that's going to be easier to understand. But let me see if I can get some out of the book here for you. Hold on. Basically, what the Decalogue is the 12 recommendations and 10 recommendations, rather. It sounds a lot like the 10 Commandments, but yet those have been somewhat modified. Are you there? Okay. Like the first one in the Decalogue is, you shall have no other mites and no gods, 10 gods or holy ones next to creation, which sounds very familiar, with the 10 Commandments, but in another way, when you see that creation itself is love, and the creation of the entity of God is something that is a creation of creation, and yet it's below creation, if that makes sense.
Stephen, are you there?
I am.
I'm sorry to do that to you, man. That's I
It's
know
okay.
I've got a crisis. I've got a dog here he's heading around third, heading for home. Let's say he's on prednisone, and he's near the end of his life, and we're doing the best we can for him right now. So when I wouldn't do that to you unless it was truly a difficulty. But we're doing the best we can here. So in any case, I kind of heard you chatting a little bit there.
Yeah, I just started talking a little bit about the Decalogue and the Dodecalogue. I picked that up yesterday, and I can't say I studied it because I just got it a day ago, but about halfway through the book, and I love it. It's a wonderful read.
Is it?
Yeah.
This is translated in English?
It is, yeah.
Okay, so this is another book I'm going to have to get. Now, this basically talks about what Billy calls the 12 Commandments.
Yeah. I don't. Like I say, I'm halfway through it, so you've got there's 12 different topics on it, but I don't want to get you off your topic, what you're talking about there, but it's concise, you know what I mean? In the Goblet of Truth, sometimes I can get bogged down a little bit. Mm-hmm. That's a great book, but it's so big, and it's so, it repeats things a lot, and sometimes you get bogged down. The Decalogue or Dodecalogue is pretty to the point, and it reads differently than a lot of his books. It's weird.
That's interesting, because I think each one of his books reads a little differently. Do you notice that? I do anyway. Like, when I read the Way to Live, it's a little bit different than the Mighty Thoughts in terms of style. That's one of the things that struck me right away when I was reading it. Now, did it hit you that way now?
No, this one, and there's a reason for it, and I don't want to get into it because it'd be a long conversation, but there's a reason for that when you read the Decalogue book, of why that is. But okay. I'll leave that for another show. Cliffhanger.
Oh, okay. We have. All right. I don't know how far I'm going to go on this today. I thought we would have Rem on by now, but Rem has gone quiet. I'm not sure what happened on his side. But, how much of the Talmud have you read through? This thing is huge.
I did read through it, but I can't say I studied it. But I did read it through once, and but I haven't studied it.
Yeah, that's the thing. His books, you don't read like a normal book. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
At least, I mean, it's interesting to read it that way, and like that's what I've been doing with the Talmud, just reading through it right now. Mm-hmm. But to really start to understand it, it's like I've said before. You may spend like a whole day on a few lines, for example, to really start to understand what that passage says, and you'll have to contemplate it. You'll have to step back and really think about it. At least I do.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
And the meaning, the real meaning, sometimes isn't, at least to me, it isn't apparent at first. It takes a while to really, really start to make sense. I'll give you an example real quick. He talked somewhere in the Mind of Thoughts about having a negative thought and then bringing it in a positive inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
And then that makes it neutral positive, which is a healthy thought. And I often think of it the other way, it's easier for me to make an example like, I'm doing great work at my day job, which was a positive. But they always challenge me with unexpected things. So that would be the negative inclusion. And that makes it neutral positive.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's neutral positive, that is the basis for the healthy thought that can start to bring in good circumstances into your life. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, they even make a mention of trying to get things like right now to speak the truth. You have to speak it harshly because it's been so adulterated that to bring it back into balance, you can't just be nice about it. You almost have to be, straight, direct, and to the point, and to stop it in its tracks because it's so out of balance that you have to counter it with something that's is strong.
What you're saying is so wise, because when I am thinking negatively, and I look at my feelings and I say, whoa, because I always notice that when I'm thinking negatively, I have a negative feeling. And boy, right on clue, we're going to bring Rem in. He's finally ready.
All right.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. It's been an interesting. Okay, we'll bring Rem on the air here.
All right.
I got to catch up with him too.
Mm-hmm.
Rem, how are you doing, man? Are you there?
Oh, good. How are you doing, Mark? Yeah, I'm here.
I'm doing fantastic. I'm glad that you could join us this afternoon. I've got Stephen on with me. Have you met Stephen yet?
Maybe. I don't know.
Stephen. I don't know. I just met Stephen through doing my show, and now he kind of helps out and is kind of the producer of the show. And he takes my shows and puts them on YouTube at times. And he just recently, I have a version of the Talmud of Jmmanuel now. It's because of Stephen. And I'm going to have to tell you one thing, Rem, is we get a lot of background noise when you're on there, so be careful about that. So I don't know if you need to,
how about this?
Is that muted? That's sweet. So
yeah, that was muted.
Okay, so do the muted thing if you at your own leisure there.
Yeah, I'll just mute it whenever I'm not talking.
Okay, that's very good. We are in the middle of a discussion on the Mind of Thoughts, and I want to get back to that, but you've been doing a lot of interesting stuff. You just got back from Switzerland not too long ago, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. That was like I got back on July 19th. I was there from when was that? Probably July 5th through the 16th. And I always feel like I have just so much more energy after I go there and can think more clearly and just have my priorities more in order. It's interesting.
Does it rejuvenate you?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe in some ways.
Yeah, it sounds like a rejuvenation. At least that was the impression I was getting.
Yeah.
And so you're just what's it like there? You guys work outside a lot, right?
Yeah. So when I got there, it was a little bit rainy, and I immediately had my rain boots on, rain gear everywhere, and just working out in the forest, clearing out some trees. They have this problem where the trees grow too tall too quickly, they say, and so they're too thin for how tall they are, and then they end up breaking, and it's harder to clean up. So what we were doing when I got there is that Christian Frenner was cutting trees down with the chainsaw, and it was like me, Tim, Derek Sheeler, Tim James, Derek Sheeler, and then Daniel Cooper came a little bit later. Oh yeah, and Sonia and Derek. So they were those three were already there. The Tim, Sonia, and Derek were already there when I got there, and then Daniel came a few days later. But yeah, we were all just, Christian was chopping the trees down, and there were trees that were marked with spray paint, and then he ended up cutting those trees that were chopped into like 12-foot sections that we were putting into piles, and then Jacobus was driving his tractor, picking up those piles of stuff and either throwing them in the big fire pit or putting them in other places to use for other purposes.
Well, let me ask you a few questions because a lot of our listeners probably don't know who Christian is. Could you tell us a little bit about him?
Christian Frenner is a core group member of FIGU, and he lives over there in the area of near Billy. And he, has taken it upon himself to devote his time to being a core group member, which is very demanding, but it's all, he understands that he can't really have any other outside hobbies or interests. It's pretty much, an extra full-time job being a core group member. And anybody who is a core group member of FIGU understands that and enjoys it, So that's kind of who he is. And I forget what his main source of income is or what his job is, but anyway, there's FIGU core group members they have their own lives, and sometimes they.
Could you tell the listeners again a little bit about FIGU and who they are?
So FIGU is the organization that Billy Meyer set up back in the 70s for the dissemination of his writings, and also the writings of any core group members if they were to wish to write anything as well. But it's mainly for the dissemination of his writings of the creational natural laws and recommendations, and contact reports and other books about human consciousness. And I feel like I'm leaving something out, but
That's all right.
but FIGU is basically set up as a nonprofit organization, and it's just a community of like-minded people who are just always trying to evolve their consciousness and really just kind of searching for the truth. They're living in harmony with nature, and how else to describe it? It's
Let me ask you this. So we got FIGU Switzerland, which is like the core group. We got FIGU Canada. But there are groups here in the United States which study the Meyer material and which meet together. You're in one of those groups in Colorado. Are you are some aspect of a FIGU member? I know there are different kinds of memberships, right?
Yeah, so I'm a passive member. Okay. And I also just signed up for the spiritual teaching course as well, which is a 40-year course that Billy has written. It's about approximately 40 years. It's comprised of about 400 spiritual teaching lessons.
And you said 40, as in 40 years.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to give people a kind of a...
That's what I've been told. Yeah.
I mean, Billy's written 50 books. Any one of those books...
No, you know what?
51?
That's incorrect.
How many?
I had about an hour-long conversation with him, all in English, and it was totally fascinating. I asked him how many books he read or wrote. Sorry.
Yeah.
And he's written up to this point. He's written 65 books.
65 books.
Yeah. So, and at any given point in time, there's always like 2 or 3 books that haven't been published that are just manuscripts, just waiting.
Was this, you got to actually talk to Billy this time?
Yeah.
Oh man, that's huge. That's really
yeah.
huge.
It was fantastic. I mean, I definitely didn't go there thinking that was going to be possible, because he's busy. He has his own life, and he's always thinking kind of, if you go there, you're kind of encouraged to not bother him too much, just to let him come to you, because he's always either working on a problem in his head or I mean, look at all the stuff that he's produced, right? And nobody can be that prolific if they're always schmoozing,
Sure.
So, but he was injured and was so he was recovering from a shoulder injury, and he wasn't able to write or anything for a few weeks, but he's okay now. But he's just I think he's back at it writing. Daniel Cooper went back since we were there together 2 months ago, and he said that his shoulder's much better and he's able to write again and everything. So, but I think for a little while he had some downtime where he was able to kind of take a vacation, a staycation, right? So,
I don't even know that I've had Daniel on this show, but I've had Daniel on my Blog Talk show. Maybe would you feel comfortable telling people about Daniel and his situation?
Yeah, so Daniel Cooper is one of the Figu Passive members, and we're friends, and Mark's had him on the show, right? Like, as you just said, on your other radio show.
Right.
And I guess he's written something that he had in his mind for a long time, which he calls his calculations. It's like probability calculations that he came up with when he was younger, that are kind of a series of checks and balances to find Figu and to find the existence of a person who ends up being Billy Meyer in this world at this point in time. It's kind of like set in a historical, historically set for all the stuff that we're experiencing in this moment of history at large.
Sorry to interrupt you, Rem. Stephen, have you met Daniel? I forget all these different people.
I did, yeah. I think Rem and I and Daniel are on several months ago. I got in the last few minutes.
Okay. Yeah, Daniel lives up in the Yukon Territory, and he had a very, very rough time growing up. And, for one reason or another, he was thinking very intensely about these issues when he was a kid, about extraterrestrial life, and it's an amazing story. But he
also said that he figured that there must be somebody who would be equivalent to Galileo or somebody like that, who lives now, who is not known by the public at large, but will be known in the future.
That is so fascinating. I stumbled across one of Billy's terms today that he mentioned in the Mind of Thoughts called rumination. It's actually, I think that there's a word even in German that's pronounced a little differently. That's spelled.
Yeah, it's called Grübelein.
Yeah, say that again, man. That's great. Great.
It's it's called Grübelein. So with that, oh crap, I left the door open. But what Grübelein basically means is, they've translated it as rumination, but I was talking about that with a German friend of mine, and he said Grübel. Well, that's there's Grübeleien, which is rumination, but then there's also these things called Grübeleinen, or I'm not an expert, so don't take this as the absolute, but I'm pretty sure he said that there's one that's the rumination, and then there's other thing called that are kind of like the lines that you get in your forehead when you're thinking about something really hard. So,
well, okay, a rumination is a deep or considered thought about something, but when the rumination kind of goes wrong, a rumination could be to continue to churn over an emotional upset, which is very, very interesting, I think, in terms of the might of thoughts. If we go down the wrong path with a rumination, we can really create a lot of grief for ourselves. So, and I was bringing that up in relation to Daniel, because Daniel ruminated over these ideas, like, where would the extraterrestrial contact be, and why would it be in Switzerland, etc., when it would be there. Can you comment to that, Ryan?
Well, Daniel had a meeting about this with Billy, about his book, and I don't know if it's my place to give a whole lot of details about that, but
okay.
One of the things that he said, the reason for that is because Switzerland is a neutral country, and it is always the country that has had peace. So, and it will remain so in the future, where no other country in the world has peace that can be equivalent to Switzerland. And Billy was actually looking for this term. I wonder if he remembers what that term is now, but like, he was racking his brain for a pretty long time trying to remember this term that he said is a perfect term in German for describing the summation of all of the points which makes Switzerland a peaceful country. And it's not just peaceful. It's like, like how all the laws are set in place, and there's no degeneracy, and how with the political and economic situation and the stability there, and its neutrality. But anyway, that's all why this mission is centered in Switzerland, and that's what Daniel also came up with.
Do you know, was Switzerland neutral in World War II?
I don't know, but I'm pretty sure it was. I think there was bombings, but Billy was saying that there hasn't been war in Switzerland, like with involving Switzerland directly, since I think he said like 1200 or 1250 or something like that.
You've got to be kidding me! That's unbelievable. That's massive. That's huge.
That's a long time.
I mean, that's just incredible. When you think of the United States, we've been around for 200 years or something like that. And we've had war like every single year except for like 3 or 4 years. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like where there's pockets of peace. I live in a pretty peaceful place, and maybe you do too, but generally this country is not a peaceful country. It's not ruled by peace like Switzerland is.
How interesting. It's a total different mindset, isn't it?
And Switzerland, probably, Switzerland is not a perfect country either, but
right.
Maybe it's better than other ones.
They don't have do they have a equivalent of a Las Vegas?
I don't know.
I wouldn't think so. We've got like 5 minutes to the top of the hour, and then we'll have a 5-minute break. So
okay.
We're winding down the first hour here of the show. I wanted to think of it. We only got about 5 minutes here. Hopefully we'll hear music or something. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. But like, where did you come across the term rumination? And boy, that seemed like something that really hit a chord with you.
That was total. That was like a totally random thing where I had a conversation with a friend of mine who lives here in Colorado in Boulder, and he is from Germany. And this was about 5 years ago when I got the Might of Thoughts, when it first got translated. I got my copy and I was reading it at the coffee shop where I used to hang out, and I saw him. He saw that it was German. He read a few lines and of the German part and saw the rumination. He saw Grübelein, and he was like, "Oh, that's." He's like this. He's like, this guy knows how to write. He's like, that's a very interesting word in German, and this guy is very pragmatic, and that was the one thing that he only read a little bit of Billy's stuff, but he said he's an extremely pragmatic writer.
That's
so
I need to improve my German study because I use the website dict.cc, and I put in the word rumination, and Grübelein, which you just mentioned, came up first, and several other words, and then the word rumination. Yeah. But I did not get all the meaning. They didn't have all the meaning that you were trying to get at there.
Well, there's Grübelein, and then there's I think I remember him saying Grübeleinen, which is a little bit different. I thought that was the word that he was using, but
the analogy of the lines in the forehead was fascinating.
Right? Yeah, that's what he said. Yeah, about the group. I think it was Grübeleinen, or I mean, I can't remember what else it would have been. But
so interesting. Well, it helps me to understand the subtleties of the language, because one of the things I did reading through the Talmud, and maybe in the second hour we can get into a little bit of this, is going over again why they say, gosh, you can't even really translate this stuff, which is stunning. I cannot, it stuns me to even think about it.
And so, since you're saying that, I want to just say to all the listeners who are listening to this, if you're really interested in what we're talking about on this show, I encourage you to go look at it at the source. Don't just take our word for it or just listen to this radio show, but also go and study up on it yourself. And because we are educated on it through the translation into English. We're not even the original German speakers. So we're learning it. It's putting it through, we're saying it through our own filter. But the best way that they always recommend, if you're really seriously interested in this information, is to go to the original German, or at least to go to the English translation of the German if you don't know German, and study it on your own, the English translation. But the German original is where all the clarity can be found, apparently.
We got 1 minute left. We're going to take a 5-minute break. And when we get back, I want to discuss the term Wesenheiten with you. And were you the one that corrected me on my pronunciation of that?
I think so.
Yeah. I love that because you even had like a whole additional kind of meaning. So let's talk about a Wesenheiten in terms of the creation and the universal consciousness. And Stephen, how much time do we have left? About 10 seconds or something? He's probably listening. I think
its time's up right now. It's 5 o'clock.
Okay, let's take a break, folks. We'll be back in 5 minutes. All right, guys, do whatever you wanted to do for 5 minutes.
Okay.
Folks, please stand by if you're listening to this show and you're getting a whole lot of weird background noises. I think after the break, this horrific cacophony will go away, hopefully. There's something strange going on at the studio right now, I think. So, in any case. About 1 minute to go here before the break is over. So if you're hearing this on Blog Talk, stand by. We'll pick back up with the show here shortly. And if this continues, what I'll do is just disconnect from Revolution Radio and we'll start hour 2 on the Blog Talk side or something. I don't know.
I can hear that sound too.
Is that Steven?
No, it's Rem.
Rem, yeah. I don't know what caused that. I think we got 60 seconds here before we're back on the air. So I'm assuming maybe that's just the interference because they play like 5 minutes of tracks, you know. Well, I'm not getting anything from the server. Are you, Steven?
Before you brought me on, I could hear that throughout the podcast prior to you bringing me on.
Wow, well, we'll have to see how this whole thing pans out here. But I think we're at the top of the hour now, correct?
We should be, yes.
Okay. So we were talking just before the break, and that sound has gone away, at least for a while. Hopefully it will stay gone, about the term Wesenheiten. And I think I'm going to try to pull out my book, The Psyche, here. I have a whole story about how I started reading this book, The Psyche. I was in Flagstaff, Arizona, on the at the airport waiting for my flight, and it was early morning. And I first started reading this, and I was just, man, all these terms. I read the first 30 pages. I don't know how many times. But a Wesenheiten is an immaterial or material existence form without a self-determining possibility of evolution. In which case, however, this possibility can be given to a certain extent, such as with the creation universal consciousness, certain energies, stones, waters, gases, etc. So, that's horrific. I tell you, Billy says whenever you're starting to evolve, there's going to be a pressure that will oppose your evolution. And it seems to be one of those days where that manifests itself. Let's do this, guys. I will, what I'll do, let me wait a few more minutes. Maybe this will clear up because we're still at the top of the hour. But if this continues, what I'll do is just disconnect from the server and then try to reconnect us. And if that doesn't work, we'll finish. It doesn't sound like it's going to work. So, well, guys,
It seems to be happening whenever you're not talking, Mark.
Which is very, very strange. Let me disconnect. I'll disconnect us. I'll hang up, and then I'll recall back in. That means if I do that, though, we're going to be. Well, let's just try to persevere a little bit longer. But if it gets absolutely, really, really bad, we'll just cut it short.
Mark, just to let you know, that first 20 minutes was doing that the whole time on the radio, just to let you know. So.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't notice until just a moment ago, or right around the break.
Were you listening, Rem, to the radio portion of it, or no?
Oh no, I wasn't. I was
okay.
I was busy, and then I just was able to connect.
All right. Yeah, because it sounds a lot better on this end, but on the radio portion, there was a lot of background noise for some reason. So.
Well, I also keep my own recording of this. It'll be interesting to see how much this will come out on my own recording. But just to get back to our topic here, Wesenheiten, an immaterial or material existence form without a self-determining possibility of evolution. So, the questions, we'll just discuss this because I'm not saying any of us are just these incredible experts that have all the answers, but I wanted to, bounce this off of both of you guys. So, does that imply, first of all, he says, such as the creational universal consciousness, certain energies, stones and waters and gases. Rem, does that imply to you that certain stones and gases and even water evolve? First of all,
I think it's a different evolution than we have. We as human beings have a conscious evolution of the consciousness. It's explained in the God Delusion, Insanity book, and it's in the intro to that book, and the same intro is also found on Future of Mankind under the title Faith, Belief in God. And that I think initially was an article that was written by Billy, and then it was expanded and included as the introduction to that book. But the stones, water, and gases have an energy evolution or a transformation evolution, which is a little bit different. I think it's probably a lot different.
Now, you mentioned quickly the God Delusion, Insanity, which I want to read that book so much. Is that the one you're doing your own translation of?
I've done OCR on a lot of it, which is optical character recognition. So, and then just Google translated on a number of pages. I don't know how much I did, like probably a third of the book or something. It's just stored in my notes on my phone.
Could you share a little bit of what you learned from that book?
Let's see. When did I did that? About eight or 9 months ago, So, and I haven't really done anything since then. So what did I learn that I still remember? I mean, I remember he said that Christianity is he called it a polytheistic monotheism, because it says it's monotheism, but then there's, there's God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. So that's like a Trinity, and the Trinity, but it's also said to be a monotheism. So,
is it like we had sent some messages back and forth on Skype like a month ago? Is that the one we were talking about that you were translating, or is there another one?
No, there's another one called An Open Word, and that was the one we were talking about then.
Now you were really psyched about that, I thought.
Oh yeah, I was pretty psyched on it. I'd only translated a little bit of it, but it's just pretty mind opening, and it's just so clear how he says that that God is the biggest mass murderer of human beings in all of human history. If we take if you take the flood into account, when he supposedly killed all of his creations, and with the knowledge that he was going to do it because he wasn't satisfied with what he had created. And then, it's if you take into consideration that his creations are also part of him, then it's almost like he committed suicide in part.
Okay, let's try to make sense of this for people, because where to begin with all this? If you look at
I know.
if you look at Judaism, and I just learned this from the Talmud, it says that Yahweh or Yahweh was incorrectly read as Yehovah or Jehovah.
Yeah.
And this was just a mispronunciation which stuck, I guess. Does that, do you remember that section?
I do remember that, yeah.
Because what's really interesting is they applied this term to this individual who was manifesting during the Old Testament that, destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, and it's Numbers chapter 31, where the Midianites were wiped out or whatever. I believe all of that was Yehovah or Jehovah, which they gave him. It was all, even the name was a mistake, if I'm understanding this correct. And this is what our religions are based on. It's based on all these confusions, right?
Yeah, confusions is is one way of putting it. There's confusions, and then there's misinterpretations, and then there's outright falsifications. But in general, confusion. Yeah.
So the Talmud of Jmmanuel, and let me thank Stephen again for sending this to me. The Talmud of Jmmanuel said there were two Judases, correct? One Judas was the traitor, and the other Judas was actually a pretty loyal disciple who was the one that was writing this scroll, this Talmud of Jmmanuel scroll, correct?
I think one was the son of a Pharisee.
Right. And his name ends with R-I-O-T, Riot. That's how I remember the bad Judas. Do you have a good pronunciation of their names? I hate to put you on the spot like this.
You talking to me?
No, Rem.
Okay.
Oh, one was Judas, I think it was Judas Iscariot.
Okay.
Iscariot.
Judas
so
Iscariot. Was that the title?
So I think it was Iscariot. The with the K is the differentiation, because the other one was almost identical, but there was no K in his name.
Judas Iscariot?
Iscariot.
Ishcariot, Judas. Say that again, please.
That's how I understand it. Is Judas Ishcariot.
That was the good Judas, right?
I think that was the bad one.
That was the bad
And the Ish with a K, Ishcariot, was the one who was
yes.
friends with Emmanuel.
So
And I guess it was there's a clarification recently that was in his name was Jmmanuel, or in his time he was called by Jmmanuel.
Jmmanuel. I think I heard Christians say that one time.
Maybe, I don't know.
So
I doubt it, but who knows?
Talmud Emmanuel by Judas, Ischkerioth, Judas Ishcariot would be the good Judas, the Judas who was the true disciple, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, good. And Judas, and I don't have the name in front of me, but there's no K, was the Judas that was the traitor.
I think so. I'm on that part right now. I'm looking. I'm just double checking.
Oh yes, Iscariot. There was a Gospel of Judas Iscariot. That's the bad guy. Where Ishcariot would be the Judas that was the good Judas. This is very interesting. It's kind of a dynamic study.
Well, it kind of goes along with the whole the teaching as a whole, which makes it clear that it is important to understand the details, because it can lead to total misunderstandings and falsifications if you don't understand some details,
Judas,
and like how
Judas Ishcariot was the disciple, the good Judas.
Yeah.
And I like the way you pronounced it as a Judas, because there really was no J sound at that time.
Right.
Which I think is still astonishing to me, which blows my mind to no end. Just coming from a Christian background, to think that they manufactured the name Jesus.
Like
Jesus
the J.
with the J sound, yeah. And what was the corrected pronunciation again of? It was Jmmanuel? Jmmanuel?
Yeah, pretty much like Jmmanuel. There's on Figu's YouTube channel, you can see a video of Christian Frenner. He's got his big white beard now.
Yeah. Like
pronouncing different different people's names, and that was one of them. Another one is Semjase. So he said that Semjase is how her name was pronounced, and then some people say Semjase, and that has a different meaning, and it's actually more of a negative meaning apparently. If it's pronounced E at the end of her name instead of A.
Now, people listening to this archived later, or people listening live right now, Billy had several extraterrestrial contacts. One was named
Many
Sloth.
dozen.
Yes.
Yeah, right?
Right. And I'm talking about the main ones. Sloth for 11 years, Asked for 11 years, and then Semjase, am I pronouncing it correctly?
Yeah.
For about 4 years or 5 years, and she had an accident which cut that whole contact short, correct?
Was part of that. She referred, and then she had a relapse of some kind where she had to go back into like their version of the intensive care unit or whatever, right?
So what happened there, I think, is an interesting story, because these people, these extraterrestrial people, are so advanced, and they have such an empathy and a telepathy, then they can read our thoughts and they feel our thoughts. And because we're less evolved than them, and our thoughts are very extreme and unbalanced at times, it literally can cause them to lose control of their bodies, to fall down and things like that. And she hit her head because a poor guy walked in the room, Jacobus, who didn't know any better, and we had a little crisis on our hands, didn't we?
Yeah, I think he felt really bad about that for a long time. But
I'm sure.
I think he was. I think they were upstairs in the carriage house where the people. I don't know if that's 100%. I don't know if that's where I think of it being, which is like the house on the property where Bernadette lives, and upstairs they do the Salome peace meditation and the Om meditation and other stuff up there, and they have their meetings up there. But I think that's where Billy was meeting with Semjase that time, like 1977 or 78, I want to say. I think late 77.
Right.
And I think they were just sitting up there. She didn't have her. I don't know if she had her protection shield little device turned on or what, but I'd have to go back and reread it. But I'm pretty sure what happened is that they were just talking, and Jacobus wanted to. He thought that they might be up there speaking, and he kind of wanted to catch a glimpse or something, and just. Came kind of like open the door, or like at the bottom of the stairwell, which if you're down there, you're never going to see up into the room because it turns right. And like they were maybe sitting over somewhere else. But I think that she heard, he like made a clink noise or like made some noise, and it startled her, and she fell back out of her chair. And as she was falling back, it all happened really quickly. I think like she was falling back, and she pressed the little button on her little belt thing to like kind of beam her back into her ship. Mm-hmm. And she ended up hitting that around like at like almost the same time that she hit her head on the little space heater in there. And then so she like hits her head as she's being beamed into the ship, and she's beamed into the ship with this injury, like a concussion or something that happened from hitting her head. And she was in the ship for some amount of time before, like she didn't like click her like checkpoint or something, and which is like a security measure. And if you don't click the make the checkpoint like they do in security, then other people know that something is wrong. So she didn't check in with the station or whatever, and Quetzal came and found her. She was almost dead, and they rushed her off immediately to their home world. They couldn't do anything, but then Asket had known these people who were really advanced and injected this kind of plasma fluid into her brain that would her brain would take as its own cells, maybe something sort of like stem cells, and it was like a plasma stuff that basically that took to the brain and became part of the brain again, but had to be wired because it was a brand new section of her brain that like had to be. I'm pretty sure that's how it happened, but she had brain damage, and then ended up getting some replacement to part of her brain. I think it takes like 70 years or something for her to. It's going to take her about 70 years or so from the time of that accident to regain all of her abilities and functions that she had before.
This is such an insight into the nature of these advanced human beings, that they're so sensitive they can sense our thoughts that way. See, we're so I don't know what the word is, numb or dense, or we have such a lack of sensitivity that you can't even sense someone's thoughts that's standing next to you until maybe they're at the point where they're about ready to, commit murder or something. Then you might get a bad vibe. That's how.
Well, the way that I interpreted it at the time that when I read that is that she didn't necessarily get startled because she caught his thoughts or anything like that. I think that she heard a sound and knew that somebody was coming, and knows that, like, the fact that she doesn't have her, well, either she didn't have, whether she had her protective shield on or not, that shields from the vibrations of Earth human beings. I don't know if she had that turned on or turned off, but like, she doesn't want to be seen. Also, that's part of the protocol. And so I think that maybe she got startled because she thought somebody was coming, and she didn't expect anybody to be on their way into where their meeting was. And so got kind of startled, and just because of all that, all of the knowledge of like what it could cause, and all the like all of the problems that it causes. Because if we're in contact with them, like the average person who's not prepared to be in their like vibrational field, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Parties. So on the one hand, if an average Earth person, like any of us, were to get close to one of these extraterrestrial humans, because of the difference in vibration, we would suddenly feel like a total reverence for creation, which would be totally amazing. We would feel all the love, and we would feel really good, and then as soon as we are out of that field, then our world comes crashing down. And we would also have a need to want to study the spiritual teaching so intensively that we would not want to eat or sleep or do anything else, and we would kill ourselves basically because of going crazy from being within their field. On the other hand,
is that the swinging wave that you're talking about, or is that just their?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's related to the swinging waves. Yeah, okay. It is the swinging waves. And then on the other hand, for them, they said that if they become in contact with us, and it's not somebody who's at the right level vibrationally, they become kind of crazy and they start to act totally illogically. Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, for going back to the other part where the Earth human becomes close to them, that actually happened one time with a person named, I think her name was Margaret Rose or something. She caught a glimpse of Billy and Semjase one time, and she got really close to the ship, and I think the ship was like down lower on the property at the center, and it was flying away, and it came within a pretty close range to this woman who was hiding in the bushes, and maybe somebody else. They were hiding in the bushes, and they got within the field of the ship itself. So the ship also has this emanation as well. And they say what the distance is, the minimum distance that somebody can be, or the maximum distance that somebody can be without being harmed. And these people were within that distance. And so she was once a core group member, and then she quit, and then she ended up apparently being died in the late 90s, she was totally confused because of this one instance where she was within the range of the frequency of the ship.
Yeah, the ship was actually, in that case, produced a wave that really damaged her, didn't it?
Yeah. Did you read that? Do you remember reading that ever?
Absolutely. And it makes me think of the fact that I remember reading in a little piece from the OM that talks about that the Ishwish in ancient times could actually be killed if they were exposed to the thoughts of the earth human. Have you read something along those lines?
No, I haven't read that. No.
Yeah, very stunning to me to read that. But this whole thing to me is like a window into a very, very, very profound truths here. To me, and the whole idea of if we could be in their field and sense their thoughts, it would be like the best feeling we ever had in our whole life, right?
Yeah, it makes me think of people who get into certain really hard drugs like heroin or something, like where you hear stories of it. It probably feels like really amazing when you're on these drugs, and then when they wear off, you just feel like your world has crashed. Kind of. It makes me think of that.
Hey, Rem, do you think that the swinging ways were different when they had intercourse with the Evas, the Earth humans?
I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah,
that's an interesting thought. I don't know. I've never thought of that.
I would speculate that they were
Talking about a long time ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, hundreds of thousands of years ago. I would speculate that they were a little different, but I bet it was still, to a degree, some of that happening, Stephen.
You know what, though? Because there's that other human race that's space traveling, but yet they can be in our presence for a much longer period of time because they're not as evolved as the Pleiaren. So maybe it's similar to that.
Right. But I bet, can you imagine the women that were seduced by these people?
Didn't stand a chance.
They didn't have any chance. Yeah, they were just completely mesmerized, I'm sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then we could get in the whole story of the offspring, which...
What a wild thought.
Some of the offspring were giants that were just, over 30 feet tall, which is so bizarre. I can't even wrap my mind around that.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder about some of these archaeology finds that you hear about if you get down the rabbit hole online, and I don't know if any of them are true or if maybe some of them are true, but sometimes you see pages that it's so hard to figure out if it's true or not. But so you see things online that say like, oh, they found a 30 foot tall skeleton. I haven't really explored that in a long time because it's just like it's just so out there and so unprovable that, I mean, logically that probably exists, and according to this information it did exist, but how do you know, as far as like a random page on a website,
Right. Why don't you
anyway
continue? This is a very interesting discussion. I'm going to have to check on my dog here real quick, and I'll be right back in about a few minutes here. Continue, guys, please.
Sure. So, I thought there was something else that I wanted to bring up as far as that stuff, but I mean, there's so many ways that there's so many different directions that you could go in because this information is so vast, right?
Oh, for sure.
And I mean, read Contact 251, and it's just like it's like a montage of all of these events, which each single event in that contact you could write a whole movie about it.
That's for sure. What are you guys studying right now?
Where in the Colorado group?
Yeah.
We've kind of been studying. We've been studying the way to live for maybe 2 years. Yeah, I mean, we go in and we'll go around in a circle. Sometimes some people read, sometimes some people won't read, and sometimes we make our way through a bunch of the verses, and sometimes we only stick to like one or two verses and just like hash it out, and just come up with examples. And it's not Bible study or anything like that. It's like we're all just trying to figure this information out, and it's so insightful, and you can get into in so many different ways.
I got an oddball question for you, but do you know anything about? I've heard it mentioned about the code that Billy puts into his writing. Do you know anything about that? What it represents, or?
Oh man, I don't. I've wondered about that too. I mean, it's an evolution code, as far as I know. I mean, it's in the front. I mean, it says in the front of every book, and what it says in the front of the book. That's pretty much all I know. It's just
Right.
it's just that it's not coercive in any way.
Mm-hmm.
It's just.
Does it release something from the storage banks? Is that what the idea is behind it?
Oh yeah, I think it does somehow release something from the storage banks, but.
So it must be a certain, like a certain message that's the same format or whatever. You hear the same words. That's where like people get the same idea on different sides of the planet at the same time because it's something that's. I heard him explain that before. You know what I mean? Where you're both people from different corners of the globe come to the same conclusion.
Okay, so it says the code releases impulses from the storage banks, which read, which were what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Which reach the reader and begin to work evolutively in him or her. So this process is unconscious and has nothing to do with coercion or manipulation, but rather only with the knowledge that's retained in the storage banks for all times, and which, when released through corresponding impulses, begins to penetrate very slowly into the consciousness.
The reason why I asked that, Rem, is with the Giza intelligences, okay, the telenotic impulses that they were doing, I wonder if that has something to do with the Bible, because there's a lot of patterns in the Bible as well. And I wonder if that's like their imitation of the creational order.
Oh, I don't know. Well, I guess everything has something to do with the creation of, right?
Yeah, because
since we're all in the creation and we're all part of it.
I guess my theory is that if these people were of Ishwish mentality, which I'm not sure if the Giza intelligences were, but if they had that level of knowledge, right, did they weave it into their false teaching to make it that much more effective in what it did?
That's like speculation, I guess. They could have, right? I would love to think that they did. I think they did, but I wouldn't love to think.
To hold more power over you, or the influence, if you will. You know what I mean?
They could have. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what their capabilities were, and how advanced they were, or how,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, I guess they were an offshoot of the Pleiaren, so they must have been pretty advanced.
Right.
But I don't know. That's an interesting thing.
Just because it's so hard to break free from that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Billy could write more than 65 books with all this information.
Oh, I know. Oh, Mark, when you were gone, I was saying that, like, if you read Contact 251, it's like basically a montage of all these different events that have happened throughout history, and you could almost write an entire movie script on just one of these things.
Right. It could be a series of movies. Like, he could do like 6 or 7 movies at least on that whole thing.
Or books. Yeah.
Definitely. It's hard to. I'm so glad to have you guys on. I'm so glad to have this discussion, because I don't know, it just opens up so many different areas of different ideas and different thoughts, and just what we were discussing about with Semjase's accident and the implication of all of that. And first of all, the implication, just the pure implication of the power of our thoughts. If you can understand the power of your thoughts, and what does it say in the Might of Thoughts? It is the nature of the thoughts that by their might alone, every conceivable thing can be brought to fruition. That's a huge statement, right? every conceivable thing.
Yeah.
But I think that's a part of our creational evolution, that it has to be that way in order for us to create and to grow within creation and to accomplish the things we need to accomplish.
Yeah, I agree. And as we continue to evolve too,
Right.
to these higher and higher levels, which it's, to me, this information is so inspiring, and it gives so much hope.
Mm-hmm.
It can turn you into such an optimist if you realize all that we have to do is harness our own thoughts. Which is not an easy thing to do either, by the way.
I just see this great responsibility that you have for every thought, every deed that you do, every action. If it's not based in love for a fellow man and for creation in general, you need to evaluate that.
Wow.
Yeah. So, do you mind if I take it into a little bit different direction?
Please go ahead.
So,
go ahead.
So there's a lot, the Me Too movement and all of this, the women's equal rights and all this stuff. It's been going on for a long time, but the women are finally becoming heard, and which is fantastic. And this information also has a lot of stuff about women, and of course, women are equal in every possible way. And one thing that Carol was saying is that she would like to write something about how Carol Steves, she's part of our group here in Colorado, and she's kind of the initiator of everything that we do. She wanted to write something about women, and how most belief systems that she's found have something in it that says that women are less, or they're kind of all misogynistic in a way. And this, the creational laws and recommendations state that women are absolutely equal in every way. And so that's all just kind of a precursor to what I'm just looking through Contact Report 251, and it says here, the predictions also provide important insight into women's future role alongside men. In the more distant future, women will fully regain their former original equal status and rights in the men's world with regard to their complete duties, assignments, and tasks. So a joint female-male relationship will come to exist, as it did in earliest times when men and women stood shoulder to shoulder with total equality of rights as they functioned and worked together. As it was in the early times, so it will be again in the distant future, i.e., women with children shall first and foremost dedicate themselves to their offspring by grooming and educating them, among other things, and will maintain the household, just as they have done from ancient times. Men will attend to and exert themselves for those matters and concerns which were designated to them throughout antiquity due to their male physique, etc. Therefore, the modern proliferation by the women's liberation movements and the single-handed push by women into upper management and responsible positions for their sole supremacy, to mention a few things, will be eliminated once and for all in order to make room for equality and equal rights that will hold true for both men and women. As a result, men and women will work together jointly on all tasks and will deal with them equally. Neither one man nor one woman will elevate him or herself above the other in rank or power regarding business, administration, government, power, and other situations, as is the case today.
Mm-hmm. And that's Contact Report 251.
Yeah, that's from 251.
You know what,
yeah.
What that reminds me of, Rem, is, if a male is considered, say, the positive and the female the negative, if you're looking at it like that, to have a balance. And right now it's so, what's the German word, Ausartung, to the male side, that it's out of balance.
Exactly.
Right.
So
Very
So,
interesting.
yeah.
The negative
Um,
and the positive are two forces that belong together and should never be separated because they depend on one another. That's straight from the Might of Thoughts.
The two shall become one. See, and you see these higher spiritual levels that they don't have sex.
Yeah.
They're beyond that.
And with regard to negative and positive, it's not necessarily good or bad, but it's
Right.
just it's kind of more like the poles on a magnet, or like the poles on a like in a battery. Like you have the negative side and the positive side,
Exactly.
and they're exactly equal. One is just there's negative and positive are just terms for like one side and the other side, right?
Polarity, like a polarity. Yep.
You know,
I'm glad-
even in creation, and I'd have to look at my notes. I think I can't remember which is which, but I think a negative charge comes from the center of creation, and a positive charge comes from the outer belts, and they meet together in the material belt to form the matter in the material belt.
Oh, really? I'd never heard that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to look
Yeah, I've
up
heard that too. Yep.
It's very, very interesting. So yeah, this whole negative and positive thing is extremely interesting, and to understand that too. And one of the things, and I'd like to run this past you guys, one of the things in my own studies is that I'm starting to see in my life is when there is a negative that appears to you, the instinct is to like fight against it or try to eliminate it, but the more and more I get is more like I need to just concentrate on me being neutral, positive, and just let the negative be, and then it seems that things go better. Have you guys thought about that or done anything along those lines?
I can see that. Yeah. Just because if it's going to come to you in your life, if you need that correction. So we are the makers of our own fortune, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I need to have something negative brought into my life to counter something I'm out of balance on, I need to allow that to come in and teach me something.
Wow, that's so wise to be able to do that, because our instinct is to fight against it. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I'm not saying that it's easy for me to do, but I'm just saying I can see the wisdom in it.
And it also says here in Contact 251, because remember, that Contact report deals with, it tells the whole story of the genetically manipulated peoples, which is the people here on Earth, that we were genetically manipulated hundreds of thousands of years ago. And if I don't want to get into that whole story because, but it says that only through the genetic manipulations will future rectification of the terrestrials' genetically manipulated degeneration be guaranteed, so that they may be able to again fit into the normal progression of negative and positive.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so I think somebody said that we've already found the gene which can be switched to reverse the genetic manipulation. So, but we don't know that that's what that is. But basically, the gist of this whole genetic manipulation stuff is that a long time ago, a group of human beings, which ends up being us, were manipulated by some like higher advanced human beings in another star system to be their fighters. And so we were, our genes were manipulated to go from 1,000 years down to like about 100 years, and that they were manipulated in also in such a way that we were more prone to fighting and more prone to like acting aggressive. So, and apparently we will discover that and reverse it at some point in time. But I wanted to tell you, when I was in Switzerland a month and a half ago or so, and I was talking to Billy, one thing that he said really stuck out, and it's something that I thought about for weeks and weeks. And he said, in his Swiss German accent, he goes, there is never a really good reason to become angry about anything.
Who said that, by the way?
Billy said that.
Wow.
In person.
Wow.
There was never really a really good reason to become angry about anything.
Goodness sakes. Boy, I need to change my thinking. I can see that.
I mean, that opens up a whole world of stuff. It's like you might, and because he gets angry, everybody gets angry. But he's saying that's the ideal, is that there's never a really good reason to be, because you can always, and you always become angry, but is there a good reason to become angry? Another thing he said is to become angry. We make ourselves angry. He said there's never a good reason to become angry. We make ourselves angry. Nobody else makes us angry. It's ultimately up to us and our emotional control to allow ourselves to become angry about something.
In those first 5 things that he talks about between pages like 200 and 230 in the Might of Thoughts, where he says, be confident and optimistic and relaxed and cheerful and thankful. If you're really those 5 things, you're probably not going to get angry. Have you ever thought of it that way? Because confidence, usually you're angry when you're threatened in some way. But if you're really confident, it doesn't bother you, right?
It's like if you take things personally, you're going to get offended.
Right. And can you be angry and optimistic and relaxed and cheerful? I don't think so.
I don't think so, but
when we get triggered, right, we let go of all of that for some reason. He talks about also to ideas as opposed to ideals. Like an idea is a thought that's not completely developed. And he says something along the lines of, when tangled ideas confuse the thoughts and it causes them to go abruptly from one extreme to another and trigger emotions which can lead to manslaughter and murder. That's like the whole series of steps that you go through when you get angry, right?
Mm-hmm. That's like one of your favorite things to talk about, Mark.
I repeat that over and over again.
Yeah.
I repeat a lot of this stuff. I think that's.
But maybe it helps you, right? You must be going through stuff that, talking about this stuff over and over again also is helping you. Must be helping you in some way, right?
Absolutely. I get so much pressure from my day job. There's always something you can be angry about, but it's much better to be neutral positive. And one of the things I've noticed is if someone strikes out against you in some way and you strike against them, and I'm just talking verbally, could be even physically, but if you really analyze your feelings, you will see that when you strike out against someone, you hurt yourself. Have you ever noticed that?
Yeah, I've definitely noticed that. Like one quick example is that, like, if I'm ever, with road rage, if I'm ever driving in my car, right, and somebody flicks me off from their car, I like to think about it that, like, they're also flicking themselves off in a way, because they're reinforcing that behavior within themselves and solidifying and solidifying their anger and making it tangible in the world.
Gosh, we're coming near the end of the show. Steve, what do we got? Just like 4 minutes here?
Not even. I think it usually wraps up around about another minute from now. That's it.
Gosh, this is a whole nother discussion we could have, because I think the whole road rage phenomena has gone crazy, and the tailgating, and gosh, and this must be related to overpopulation to a certain degree.
Oh, it must be. You could easily relate it to overpopulation. Can we end the show on a more positive note than that?
Why? Certainly.
There's music.
Well, that's the positive note, I guess, is the notes of the music.
Thanks so much, Fred. It's always a pleasure. Thanks, Mr. I really enjoyed our discussion. Have a great day. Bye-bye.